Now, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced an economic aid package for Lebanon, and has urged it to tackle illegal migration to the bloc. Speaking in Beirut, she said the EU will provide a €1 billion aid package to the country in return for Lebanon tightening its borders. She's meeting with Prime Minister Najim Mikati, as well as Nicos Christodoulides, the president of EU member Cyprus. Now, because of its location in the Mediterranean Sea, Cyprus is dealing with a sharp increase in the number of Syrian refugees arriving by boat from Lebanon, and has lobbied the EU for months to extend aid to Lebanon. Now, Lebanon hosts more than 2 million Syrians, over half of whom have entered the country illegally. Lebanon itself is in the middle of its worst ever economic crisis. Many Lebanese say the high number of Syrians in their country is making the situation worse. DW's Beirut Bureau Chief Mohamad Chreyteh reports now, and a warning to our viewers that some of you may find images in this report distressing.
A fresh wave of fury at Syrians in Lebanon. This time it looks much more serious. The recent murder of a local Christian party official, allegedly at the hands of a carjacking gang of Syrian nationals, has triggered violence and vitriol at Syrians in Lebanon, including at displaced refugees. Ahmed fled war-torn Syria 10 years ago. Now he fears being displaced again, this time from Lebanon.
We are afraid and barely sleep at night. Every time someone knocks at the door, we fear that someone has come to attack us. I'm unable to go to work or to the supermarket. I can't leave home. I've been receiving threats demanding I leave the neighborhood within 5 days. Where shall I go? I can't go back to Syria. I'm wanted and would be immediately drafted into the military.
To all Syrians in Burj Hamud, you must leave your shops and residences by Friday at the latest. You've been warned.
For tens of years, Syrians have lived in this neighborhood together with Lebanese, mainly Christians. But now these Syrian-run shops have been shut down, and many Syrian families have left their rented homes.
They took over our businesses and replaced us. They come into Lebanon illegally and are increasingly committing crimes and murders.
I want them out in any way possible. I just want them out. They took our jobs and disrupted our lives.
Those who have a legal status can stay, but those who are here illegally should leave. But attacking them is not acceptable.
Under pressure by Lebanon's economic collapse and the country's political paralysis, the authorities are echoing these sentiments.
We urge the security forces and the police to firmly and strictly implement Lebanese law on Syrian refugees.
Lebanon hosts the greatest number of refugees per capita of any country in the world. More than 2 million Syrians in Lebanon form 45% of the population. This would be equivalent of nearly 38 million refugees in Germany and some 153 million refugees in the United States of America.
These sort of numbers are very significant in the context of Lebanon's sectarian power-sharing model. The vast majority of the refugees are Sunni Muslims, and that has been fueling fears of a huge demographic imbalance in a country where Christians and Muslims share power equally.
In a rare scene of political unity, rival political parties are calling for the deportation of Syrian refugees, pushing many of them towards choices that is making Europe very nervous.
I can't stay here against the will of the Lebanese. I don't know what to do. I may try to leave for another country, but I know I have no other choice but to go through illegal migrant boats.
With onward migration through legal routes out of reach, the dangerous sea journeys to Europe will only increase.
And joining us now is the author of that report, our Beirut Bureau Chief Mohamad Chreyteh, and DW's Teri Schultz, who joins us from Brussels. Mohamad, tell us why the EU is making this announcement now. I mean, we know that Syrians have been taking refuge in Lebanon for a long time.
Right, simply because Cyprus is under pressure and is pressuring the EU in return. So to understand how serious is the influx of refugees is affecting Cyprus, we have to look into these numbers presented by the Interior Ministry in Cyprus that suggests that more than 2,000 people arrived in Cyprus by boat between January and April of this year, compared to only 78 people who arrived to Cyprus in the same period of time last year. That is nearly 30 times more refugees in a year, and that's why Cyprus is ringing the bell and putting some pressure on the EU to turn an eye to Lebanon and help Lebanon manage the long-standing refugee problem.
I understand. Teri, if I can turn to you, can you tell us about how this billion-euro aid package is practically going to help Lebanon?
Well, that's how the European Union wants to portray it, Anya, as helping Lebanon with 1 billion euros, which is entirely in grants. So that is, of course, good news for Beirut. And it will be helping Lebanon, they say, in terms of helping improve the education sector, health care. They're going to help with reforming the financial and banking sector. There'll be new training and equipment for Lebanon's armed forces. But in fact, some 3/4 of this money is actually going to go toward helping the refugee crisis inside Lebanon. And for the European Union, that means tightening the borders and increasing cooperation with Frontex, the EU's border control agency, because what's in the EU's interest is keeping those people in Lebanon and not allowing any more of them to leave, attempting to get to the European Union. So while this package may be portrayed as being for Lebanon, it's also very much for the European Union.
OK. Mohamad, talk to us about this suggestion that the presence of so many Syrians is actually burdening the economy. Is that a fact?
It is. I mean, if we look at the numbers, the Syrian communities form 45% of the population of Lebanon today. This is quite a burden on Lebanon's economy and infrastructure. For example, a recent count by the Ministry of Interior in Lebanon shows that more than 35% of prisoners in Lebanon are Syrians, and prisons are already overcrowded, and prisoners are facing unbearable conditions already. Another aspect, Syrians are underpaid, and therefore they are much more higher than Lebanese because it's cheaper, and this is leaving Lebanese with much less jobs. This has been creating rage and anger from hosting communities as well. But all this is really only the tip of the iceberg in Lebanon's failing state. The inability of the ruling elite to deal with many layers of problems and on all aspects like economic, financial, political, social, the list goes on. So scapegoating Syrians has been largely used by Lebanese politicians who frequently blame the Lebanon's crises on the Syrian refugees, more than 1.5 million Syrian refugees. And this rhetoric has been further fueling intercommunal tensions.
I see. And Teri, the EU has, of course, struck deals with other countries, hasn't it? Turkey, Egypt, to help manage the refugee crisis. Can this aid package to Lebanon really help control the numbers of refugees who are trying to get into the EU?
Well, that's clearly what EU leaders are counting on, and they have seen some success with this model, as you mentioned, in Turkey, where increasing border protections and improving the situation in the camps, expanding the camps inside Turkey meant more people were kept there rather than getting in boats and trying to make it to the European Union. But as Mohamad explained, this has to be made attractive to the Lebanese government as well, and that's why this money and this assistance in Lebanon Lebanon's own socioeconomic conditions is so important. But again, let's be honest, the European Union needs to show that it's doing something on migration ahead of European elections, which are coming up in just a few weeks, with migration to be one of the top issues there that voters are going to be deciding on. And you can't ignore the fact that the Israeli-Hamas war is creating even more refugees, and some of those have ended up in Lebanon already, and that's something the European Union is worried about. So this package is something that EU leaders very much hope will stem the tide. Human rights activists are not so thrilled with these conditions, but we'll just have to see how this works out with Lebanon.
Teri Schultz and Mohamad, thanks to you both so much for that.